So my name is Nguyen. I'm a technical advisor for Trend Micro. I've been with Trend Micro for now, I want to say about over 8 years, working in the security realm, do a lot of kind of threat research for our team in general. And today, I kind of want to have a dialogue and share what Trend Micro knows around the threat actors, the threat landscape, and I like it to be an open dialogue. So if there's any questions, feel free to stop me at any time. I'm more than happy to answer it to the best of my abilities. If not, I can definitely get your contact information and then follow up with you at a later time. So it's very important for us to understand the threat actors and cybercriminals, so that way we can formulate a strategy on how to better protect ourselves in general, right? There's an old saying, like, know your enemy is half the battle. So as we all know, this year has been very challenging for a lot of organizations, to say the least, right? There have been a lot of breaches from OPM, Home Depot, Sony, Ashley Madison, that carries a lot of consequences that comes with it, with a breach. And all these organizations have various different security controls in place, but yet they were still affected, right? So that begs the question, why? Why were they affected, and what can we learn from them, right, from those breaches? And what are the things that we need to be concerned about this year and the subsequent years as we progress? And based off of one research, things that we should keep in mind would be IoT, right, Internet of Things, but I want to talk about maybe beyond IoT, but IoE, right, the Internet of Everything. Everything nowadays is interconnected in one way or another. So connected, as a matter of fact, at a recent Black Hat event, threat researchers was able to hack an automated vehicle. Also, in last April, I'm not sure if you're aware, a threat researcher, Christopher Roberts, he tweeted online that he was able to hack into a flight that he was on, right? That's pretty alarming because, as you know, we have a lot of different threats out there, from terrorism, cyber terrorism, and so on. Having access and easily control a flight can bring a lot of unwanted consequences from that respect. And I just recently heard an announcement where Virgin America is now allowing streaming of Netflix and so on their flights as well. So things are more interconnected. We're opening up a lot more access. So those are the kind of things that we need to be careful and be very mindful as we're developing our security strategies around. There's also definitely concerns around sophisticated DDoS attacks, social media attacks. Social media attacks is a major concern, dear to my heart, because that's where most, I want to say, point of entry begins, through a social engineering type of attack, right? They're gonna try to infiltrate you through probably a spam or a phishing campaign message initially that is using social engineering tactics. Mobile malware, huge. How many of us here have a mobile device? 2 mobile devices. 3? Oh, not 3? Wow, okay. Maybe I'm and we'll probably have various different platforms as well. So everybody here I saw had at least 1 or 2 mobile devices. How many of us have security on those mobile devices of some sort? Okay, maybe about a third of us, right? And everything is interconnected, so we got to be careful about that, right? And we also have to be careful about third-party attacks. And let's be candid, right? Hackers have an unfair advantage. There's very little consequences for them to do what they do, right? They have access to easy weaponized tools that require no skill set whatsoever. So they can craft a new malware just like that. Whereas us as an organization, we have a lot of constraints and challenges, not only from a budget perspective, but resources, and what controls we actually have in place that would not, I want to say, put a burden on our normal business operations. So we always have to find that balance between security and operations. And we have absolutely no control over our users. Like, as much as I want to tell my dad not to visit certain websites that he's browsing to watch certain videos that he wants to watch, I can't stop him, right? Also, in the security industry, there was a survey that was conducted, 63% of security professionals agrees that it's only a matter of time before they're targeted. 78% of cyber espionage starts with an email, right? That's pretty common. I would say probably most target attacks, it's going to be around the high 80s, 90% using email as a point of entry. And we all know the cost of a breach. So let's talk a little bit about the cyber criminals. What do they look like? What are they after, right? If we had to bucket these cyber criminal or threat actors into categories, how would we group them? We have our hacktivists. Example of those hacker groups would be Anonymous and Lusec, and they really don't have any specific target. It's whatever the mass audience really votes on, right? You have your organized crime, which is really after financial gain, credit card information, and so on. And you got your economic espionage, which is really after your IP information, your intellectual property. And you have your nuisances, which are more of script kiddies, the new up-and-coming, cyber criminals. They want to practice their trade, so they'll target anybody and everybody. But ultimately, what this really boils down to is money. The underground market is huge. And when we're talking about financial gain by these cyber criminals and what that underground market looks like, Trend Micro researchers have been monitoring the Russian underground market for many years and what it looks and how it has evolved, gone through its ups and down cycles. And here is an example of what your credit card information would cost in the underground market. You can buy a US credit card number for less than $3. Right? There's other reports that actually shows how much it will cost to purchase an exploit kit to craft your own malware. There was a widely known exploit kit that was used in the past that was probably cost, I want to say back in 2011, around $300. They're giving it away for free now. Instead, they move into a service model where I'll make sure that you get updates. I'll make sure that your malware that you're crafting would be undetected by security vendors. But I'm going to give you the kit for free, right? As far as the threat landscape is concerned, there's pretty much 3 challenges that we have in general, right? Which is the pure volume of it, the velocity of, and the variation of the threats. Based on our research, we can see that phishing sources has grown significantly from 2013 to 2014. We've also seen that the numbers of unique malware or files being blocked has also exponentially grown as well. And according to one security vendor research, how many of you here would guess the number of new pieces of malware was identified in the last year? By show of hand, just curiosity, 218 million. 317 million? Okay, about a couple of, 410. Wow. For the 2 that rose your hand, you're correct. 317, and that number is going to vary from one vendor to the next, depending on what they see and what is sourced. But that's roughly about the same ballpark that everybody agrees upon. As a matter of fact, here's another interesting fact. According to Verizon's data breach report, 70 to 90% of malware samples are unique to an organization. Right? Even though the volume is relatively high, unique samples are only reaching, 79% of them are reaching one organization. And according to Trend Micro researchers, when we're involved in a target attack or a breach investigation, we find that 99% of those malware are only touching less than 10 hosts. So it's becoming a greater challenge just sourcing that information. Before, when you had wide outbreaks, hopefully you're not victim 0, right? But victim 0 will help protect everybody else. But now it's becoming more challenging. I'm sorry, Dean. Malware samples themselves. So out of that 317, 79% of them are unique to one organization. So it's not that type of piece of malware it's not spreading from one organization to the next, as whether or not it's intentional or that it's being introduced, or maybe it's your layer of security, but just in general, from what researchers have found, only 70–90% of those samples that were submitted and what we've done investigation on is only associated to one organization. We've also found that, we know that spear phishing attacks normally uses attachments as an introductory point, right? How they get in. It's no longer just an email with a link, visit this watering hole, download a payload. They're actually including attachments. But the type of attachments they're including nowadays is including macro, right? They're heavily using macro embedded in the Excel, Word document, and so on to introduce payload into the environment. Right? And according to Verizon's data breach report as well, there are certain departments that are more prone to these type of social engineering attacks and attachment-based attacks, right? Such as human resources, right? Where their job function is to open up resumes and so on, right? So they are more susceptible to those type of attacks, to those spear phishing attacks. I actually recently saw a spear phishing campaign that just came out, that was just sent to everybody. I even got one myself that says, oh, here's my resume, please review. It's a Word document. Now, obviously upon further investigation, and I don't work in the HR department, so I don't know who this individual is, obviously that's a spam, right? Spear phishing attack that's just trying to exploit potentially a vulnerability or my lack of security knowledge, per se. And who's here has been hit by ransomware in their organization? Quite a few of us, right? Well, this is what we've been monitoring as far as ransomware activity. When ransomware was first introduced, it started out with a fake AV, fake antivirus. It was a nuisance, but it didn't do really any major damage to a system. But nowadays, it has evolved to where it's encrypting your documents. Right? There also have introduced ransomware not only to lock your documents, they've also have variations of these ransomware that is acting like almost like an antivirus solution, where it's actually quarantining your files itself and putting a lock file on it. It has also moved over to the mobile landscape as well. And the one thing that we need to be mindful about the mobile threat landscape is it's evolving at a more rapid pace than the PC industry. All the PC malware that took about 12 years to introduce in the PC world, it only took 3 years to introduce it in the mobile threat landscape. The number of unique malware samples in the mobile threat landscape is now equal to the PC threats as well. Right, so it's something that we need to be very cognizant about, and it makes a lot of sense to me because if we look at the number of PCs that were shipped in the past few years, it has declined, whereas mobile devices shipment has increased. So cybercriminals are going to go for what's the bang for the buck, right? That's going to be in the PC mobile area. Yes. In November, we just saw an additional increase. This could be to various different campaigns, how easily they're seeing, I want to say, a quick return in their investments. They're actually getting a lot of success in introducing ransomware into environments. It's started off at the consumer level, now moving to the enterprise space as well. And there are toolkits available for them to create this. And matter of fact, there's a hidden tier ransomware source code that is available on GitHub that you can download as well. So somebody that is starting out in the cybercriminal, early stages of their career can download that ransomware source code and easily craft something on their own. So the cybercriminals are making it a lot easier for anybody to craft something.
Have you seen the ransomware crossover to, like, when you log into your network and there's like another process in that space and encrypt those files?
So ransomware today have not, I want to say, based on what I've seen, have not done any sort of port scanning and authentication through unmapped shares. So ransomware today are not worm type of malware. They are purely isolated to one system, which is great, but any system, any drives that are mapped to that system is going to be affected. And most of the times, in a lot of organizations, our users is mapped to a home drive of some sort or a shared drive, which has thousands of documents. Right? So one user, while it's only affecting one system, can affect a pretty large community. Right? So we also have to probably reassess how we do our file sharing processes. Should we add a read-only? Should we add multi-factor authentication to those shares, so where they start off with the shared login, and then if they want another read-write, then they have to have elevated privileges to log in. Various different scenarios, or isolated their folder access to only their working area space versus using one common shared location. Right? Also, we noticed that in 2014, the number of ransomware activity in the US alone has grown significantly as well. Once again, this kind of goes back to how successful ransomware has been. And this trend is going to continue to occur. I've seen new payloads of ransomware pretty often. It's kind of scary. So let's talk a little bit about the breaches and what are the facts around breaches. So data breaches in general, according to Mandiant, 100% of the investigations that they're involved with all have up-to-date anti-malware solution. 63% of those breaches were reported by third parties. So that means internally we're not doing a good enough job or a quick enough job to identify that we've been compromised. We actually have to rely on third parties where not is publicly announced by the cybercriminals themselves. I have your data. Here's a sample of it. Right? And 100% of those breaches involve stolen credentials. So how are those criminals getting in and evading our detections? Once again, start with the spear phishing campaign spam. Right? That's their primary source of infection vector today. It's the easiest way. Also, they're not using conventional methods to introduce themselves into your environment. They'll use any and every possible infection vector. If you have a presence in the cloud, they might attack your cloud. If you have things on Facebook, they might infect your Facebook account to be able to tie that back to your corporate account. Right? They'll attack people that you know. Right? So a lot of times, we might feel like my organization doesn't do anything that would warrant a cyber criminal to want to compromise my system or compromise my employee base. But that's not always true. You might not be their end goal, but you do business with somebody that is their target. So they're going to focus on getting to your environment because it's a lot easier to break down your infrastructure versus their target. And then you have that trusted relationship. Right? So as an organization, we also have to question not only how are we doing with our security posture, but also the vendors that we work with. What is their security posture? What controls do they have in place? How much access do we give them to our infrastructure and our environment? Do we want to just open up the floodgates to that? We also have to be mindful of our patch management cycle as well. How well are we doing with patching our systems? How many of us here still have Windows XP within our environment? Okay, quite a few. Windows 2000, 2003, NT, hopefully not. So we got to do a better job at patch cycles. There are exploit kits that actually are baking in latest Adobe's vulnerabilities into the exploit kits as well. And here's a little diagram that shows this. Pretty much according to our researchers, all the new zero-day vulnerabilities with Adobe is now included within some of the most popular exploit kits. So we're not patching on a regular basis, especially our end-of-life systems, or even just custom homebrew application that requires to run on a certain version of Adobe or Java. We gotta make sure that we're doing that as best of our ability, or introduce security solutions that can help prevent that. There are a lot of security solutions out there that can provide vulnerability shielding or virtual patching. Right? The reason why I kind of hammer on the patching is because even today, we are seeing the worm down AD, or the configure malware, which is a piece of malware that exploited MS-0867 back in 2008, as still one of the most readily used malware, or seen malware out there today. Because it's still very successful. There are people out there, there are organizations out there that still haven't patched their systems. And I know that vulnerability by heart because I've dealt with so many outbreaks with that one. So let's talk about some of the stages around a target attack and what that would look like. It all starts with social engineering, intelligence gathering, right? They're going to do their due diligence and to better understand you as an individual, as an organization, who you deal business with, so that way they can craft their campaign specific to that. And then they're going to find their point of entry. And once they find their point of entry, the first thing they're going to do is establish a command and control. That way they can send additional pieces of malware, payloads. They basically establish a beachhead, in essence. And then they're going to start moving laterally within your organization. And they're going to try to discover where your value assets are. Maybe your login credentials, your intellectual property information of sort. And ultimately, they're going to exfiltrate that for monetary gains. So I want to kind of give you a use case scenario of a particular government agency that we were involved with. And this particular case study is rather sophisticated in the way that the cybercriminal controlled the environment in the system. At a high level, they started with a watering hole as their point of entry, where a user visited this particular site and was compromised, and then became a command control system for the cybercriminals. And what the piece of malware did was it leveraged a WMI script. So it injected a WMI script onto the system, and WMI scripts cannot be identified easily where the malicious code resides. You actually have to use a very specialized tool to even see that code, right? So here is a screenshot of that WMI script, and as you can see, the script is called WMI script kids, right? They're not even trying to hide the malicious code. It's because they know it's so hard to identify that particular threat and where it's located, right? So they didn't even bother to mask themselves. And if we dig deeper into that code to see what it does, what it's doing is it's monitoring your recent folder location. That's when if a user is accessing a specific file, document of some sort, it's constantly monitoring that location for that activity. And it's going to make a copy of everything that is accessed. Right? And to summarize, what it does is, as it's monitoring that recent location, it's also set up to only run every 4 days to get new information, intelligence, new payloads, and exfiltrate that data. So even if we have a network monitoring solution in place, how easy would it be for us to spot that as an anomaly? It will potentially look at its normal traffic, or we'll be head deep in other alerts that one alert does not get raised up, right, to our attention. And this is the watering hole site that they were able to compromise. Is a standard blog site with an encrypted data. And that encrypted data is actually what's pointing to the true command and control. So even if you have a web proxy in place, if you don't actually explicitly block this site or this blog site, no security vendor would block it, because by nature it's not hosting any malicious piece of code. Right? The true command control is at a different location. So this was very sophisticated how they set it up. So this kind of talks about that whole threat cycle, where users visit the site, they grab the command control, then actually communicates with the command and control. It then opens access to the cybercriminal to send additional payloads, exfiltrate the data, and so on. And based on our research, when we were looking at this particular case, we noticed that there are 43 blog sites that the user has compromised. So as new command control data is coming down, it'll just update the blog sites that that particular malware would just call out to. Right? Just in case you do identify that particular blog site, they have a various different lists that the malware can communicate to and get updated CNC. And through our investigation, we discovered that particular malware was in that environment for over 8 months, right, and was able to exfiltrate sensitive information out as well. Another case study I want to share with everyone here is around mobile ransomware. In this particular case, there is a piece of mobile app that was available to users to download, whether or not it's from third-party app store or Google Play Store itself. And the one thing with Google Play Store is they don't go through a rigorous investigation of the application itself. It's pretty much open source. You can upload whatever you want in there. There's actually was a piece of fake antivirus software that was hit Google Play's top 10 downloaded app for a short amount of time that was later identified that it was a fake antivirus solution. It wasn't even designed well, and the only reason why it was caught was it actually reached the top 10 downloaded app and paid for it. It only costs $5. And when you download it and you install it, you notice that, wait a second, that particular security vendor logo doesn't even look correct, and the feature and functionality, the GUI interface, was not even well designed at all. But this particular app, what it does is it allows the users to view adult content. And it even gives a warning message to the user, I would need this level of access to your mobile device for you to be able to install the app. So the user actually have to willingly hit accept. And once they do, that piece of malware has full access to your camera. So it's taking photos of that user, right, on the phone itself, without the user knowing. Now, once it does, once they have captured your photos, they'll give the user this particular message, basically informing them that they've identified you viewing child pornography, and threatened with legal actions. It even takes a picture of you and the content that you were viewing, supposedly viewing. Right? And if you don't pay, then they'll report you and so on. And they've actually, depending on the region that you're in, whether or not you're in the US or a different region, non-US mobile devices will get a prompt to install a fake antivirus on your mobile device as well. So the threat landscape for mobile is real, it's out there. If you have an iPhone, it's not as crazy. Android is a very infested mobile landscape just due to the open source nature, right? But there are threats on the iOS platform as well, just not as prevalent. So what can we do to better protect ourselves? Definitely, we still need our standard layer of protections, right? Next generation firewall, your intrusion detection, your anti-malware solution, email and gateway, but we need something beyond that. And in the recent years, one of the new technologies that are out there is also sandboxing capability. However, cybercriminals are fully aware of sandboxing capabilities. They build malware to evade even sandbox detection. Right? There's various different techniques in there. But we definitely have to start with a layered security approach, right? And the one other thing is that I want to include that beyond just technology, it's also similar to what we're doing here today. It's about education. Educating our end user community around the threat landscape as well. Things to look for when it comes to a spear phishing attack. What are the common things to spot out that can help you identify, is this potentially a spear phishing or is this a legitimate email? Right? There are various different common things you can look for. For example, if there's a link in there, hover across the link and see whether or not does the link is truly what it is, or is it redirecting to a different site? Right? Do I know this individual or not? Is this relevant to me or not? If I'm not in part of HR, why are you sending me your resume? Right? So helping our user community be more hypersensitive to security in general is always a win-win situation. You definitely want to make sure that whatever security vendor you go with has a pretty robust threat intelligence database that can correlate various different threat feeds and information. Because the more intelligence they have, the better they are going to be able to share that with you. This is an example of Trend Micro Smart Protection Network, where our Smart Protection Network includes our threat researchers, our web crawlers. You as our Trend Micro customers, you're feeding that threat intelligence back to us, so that way we can better protect our customers. Third-party feeds, honeypots, and so on. You also want to make sure that you have in your security stack is what we would call a connected threat defense. So here I've kind of outlined the at a high level, various different potential security controls that you have in place, from a central management solution to a web proxy, anti-spam, and so on. And we know that most threats come through email, right? Today we have data breach detection that can detect those payloads, block it in line, or maybe just report on it, right? And it'll tell us, the dynamic, what are those CNC callbacks that we found through the sandbox detonation? What are the SHA-1 information, right, from those payloads? What do they look like? Now that's all great intelligence, but there's a problem. It's not sharing that information to your other security solutions. So there's still a manual process that we have to do as an organization to grab those indicators of compromise, the CNC, add it to my firewall or proxy blocking, that SHA-1 value, give it to my security vendor to create a pattern to protect myself from it. Right? There are still steps and there are delays in those steps, right? Because it takes time for processing and so on. And all the while, that has already made it into your environment. That's granted if you actually had the time to view the alerts, to take action and do something about it. Right? How quickly are we responding and reacting to those alerts? Depends on our resources, the projects we're working on, and other priorities, right? So what we need to do is we need to be able to have an environment that is more open to sharing those threat intelligence in a more automated way. That way they can take action upon it without our intervention, and then as we have time, we go back into our investigation or incident response cycle. And that's what Trend Micro calls our connected threat defense. What I've done, and I promise this is only one of my 2 marketing slides, is that we're able to do that with our breach detection. So for our Trend Micro customers that have our breach detection technology, it would be able to connect and feed that back automatically. If you guys want to see what that looks like, just come see me outside our booth later, and I can give you more information around that. And this is my last marketing slide, and that wraps up my presentation for today. Who we are is we're Trend Micro. We've been doing security for 26 plus years. Security is our only focus. As you can tell, we have a pretty large portfolio of security solutions in general. Most of our focus is on threat research with, I want to say, half of our employee base are threat researchers in general. So we take security very seriously. Love to hear, more of your challenges and be able to help you guys in any way possible. Whether or not it's just, providing some recommendations and whatnot. So I want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, just feel free to stop by and say hi at our booth. Thank you.